Cache-maniacs.
GeoGearHeads.
Welcome to episode 288 of the GeoGearHeads. I'm Daryl W4 for the vacationing Chris of the Northwest, and for our very special guest, Shermanator18.
Hi, everyone.
Thanks for joining in and helping to fill the void that is the absence of Chris of the Northwest.
I know, it's very sad. I don't know if I could fill those shoes.
Well, we're not asking you to fill the shoes, just kind of fill some of the void that he leaves by not being here.
Right. Okay, I could try.
Hey, Chris, we miss you, and hopefully you'll be back next week and everything will be hunky-dory. But tonight we do have a bunch of emails, including one that's not related to the topic, which is multi-device caching. However, Bloody Cool emailed us right after this apparently happened and asked, is anyone else seeing this puzzle piece icon show up for mystery caches on the website? I just noticed it this morning. Some, but not all, of the mystery caches show up with this icon. The rest show up with a normal question mark. And the icon that he's talking about is a blue puzzle piece, basically. So I did try it myself, couldn't get it to reproduce, and I checked on the caches that I had done corrected coordinates because I was a little suspicious that's what was going on. Still didn't find it, so I had to email Chris Ronan, see if they were doing some like A/B testing or something like that, and he pointed me to the ever so obvious release notes in the forums. So June 29th, we got this new feature, and in short, what they're doing, and we'll link to it, of course, in our show notes, is the puzzle piece icon for the corrected coordinate. So puzzles that have a corrected coordinate will show up with the puzzle icon instead of the question mark. And right now, it's available only on the website, and the maps on the website. It's not going to change the icon in the listing, but it's going to. Actually, no, it does show it in the listing. I misread that. I apologize. So it does show it in the listing and on the map, and that's going to be on the website and on the iOS app, with supposedly the Android version's coming shortly.
Android always seems to take a little time to get their updates out there for some reason.
Well, and sometimes they seem to get the stuff first, but the last, I'd say 3 or 4 months, it does seem like the iOS version drops sooner, which I don't understand. Because it actually, remember the days of the classic app, that's what they called it. It always seemed like the Android app was coming out with stuff before the iOS app.
I don't know. So I switched from Android to iPhone right about that time, so I forget like what was what. I have no idea.
What was what? But yeah, they've got the one app now with basically similar code bases as I understand it. However, if I remember what Nate had said, there's 3 people working on the iOS code and 2 on the Android code.
Ooh.
So there, I think, lies the problem. You've got this new feature that's being rolled out. You've got a couple of people working on the Android version. It has to be tested on, I think they're doing something like a dozen different devices, internally.
Mm-hmm.
And then, all of the lackeys with Android devices have to test it, I'm sure, as well. So they probably do have to go through a little bit more work for quality control, since there's only really a couple of devices that they need to check for iOS.
Right. Only a couple iPhones. Android has a lot more different phones.
Yeah, a lot of different variants that tend to cause some problems with testing.
Mm-hmm.
But we are going to talk about the multi-device caching tonight. The last time we talked about this was back on 104. That we've talked about it, I'm sure, many times since, but that we've done a full show dedicated to it. That was back in December of 2013. So almost 4 years ago.
Yeah, that's a long time ago.
That's probably a little too long to let this subject rest, because so many people do like to go with multiple devices, and it is not all that easy. It definitely has some advantages, but it's just not not the way that any of us would like it to be, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
We'll start off, though, with an email, or actually it was a Google Plus post from Team Aviju, who said, "This is very easy. I'm not going to buy another GPSR until it can communicate via an open, i.e. documented in public, protocol toward my smartphone. It's 2017. Why do I have to be limited to attaching the cable I plug into my GPSR toward the computer at home to exchange data with it and praying that when I turn it on, it doesn't shit itself?" We probably should have bleeped that out. But in any case, I simply turn on the radio on the GPSR, followed by a tap on the phone, and turn off the radio, and you should be done. No rocket science here. Now, Sydney, your first reaction when you saw this was, doesn't that happen with the Oregon 750?
Right, that was my first thought. But I had one of those briefly, and then I kind of gave up on it because it was too frustrating for me. So I returned it and went back to just my phone and my regular old GPS.
I don't blame you. I'm still trying to get an update on that thing that really makes it work for me. And the problem, that's not an open and documented standard. And really all that's happening with the Oregon 750s, you're using your phone as essentially a hotspot. You can't really talk between the phone and the GPS. It's just using it as a conduit to get out to the internet.
Right.
So the Oregon is doing the search for the caches and bringing it up. I can't go to like the geocaching app or Cachely or CGeo, have a cache that I'm looking at, like especially if there's like a new cache notification. If I get that email, it would be awesome to pop it up on a geocaching app and take a look at it. Okay, I want to go to this, hit that button, send it to the GPS. But no, they can't do that because it's its own proprietary format.
Right. I think I asked you about this at one point or another, because there's on occasion sometimes when I have my GPS with me and I forget one cache or something, we end up looking for it. And then I'm like, I just wish I could take it from my phone and put it on my GPS because I can get it on my phone, but it doesn't work that way.
Yeah, well, I really want the ability with the Oregon 750, and we'll get into more detail later, to use it to find the cache and then bring it up somehow on the phone. Maybe it's just, I don't necessarily want to, log immediately on the phone, but just so that I could take that log feature on the GPS and have that sent to the phone in a queue. Mm-hmm. That would be kind of, ideal or something like that. But we'll talk about that later on. But the core is the Oregon 750 came so close to giving us what we wanted, and yet it's so far from being usable.
Right. That was my original thought, was like, this is going to be so exciting. This is exactly what I want. And then not quite.
Yeah. But it is a step. Hopefully we'll see a new version later. And I'm still hoping for updates to the 60 and 70 series, the more traditional GPSRs, 60 being the, right now the 64 or 66. I can't remember which is kind of that, hiking GPSR that was the gold standard of GPSRs. And then the 70 is the waterproof version of the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So if we could get those devices working with the functionality that we have in the Oregon 750 and some kind of way to talk to an app, then I think we've got something that might really be helpful.
Yeah.
But at this point, it's a nice unit, but I never use it. I actually go back to my E-Trex because it's smaller, battery lasts longer, and it's easier to use two devices when I have something that much smaller in my hand.
I agree. Totally agree.
All right, what coaster sent us an email? So actually a Google Plus post. I'm just assuming everything's emails these days, but we are still getting Google Plus posts. So Sydney, why don't you go ahead and read that one?
Sure. What Coaster says, I use my phone, Samsung Galaxy S7, with the geocaching and CGO apps. I also use a Garmin eTrex 20. I used an Android tablet a couple of times, but found it too bulky for use in the woods. The phone or GPSR can easily be held in the hand or shoved in a pocket. Most tablets are too big for that. And I would certainly agree that tablet is not going to do too well in the woods, especially if it's, if it's bigger than a phone. I can't hold it in one hand, and I'm using another hand to do something else usually. So I can see where that would be a problem.
Yeah, there's a time and place for the tablet, and it's almost never outside of the car or the house.
Right. I've seen a few people with the tablets out at like events and stuff, and I just wonder, how do you even do that? Like, you have to hold it with two hands, and I don't know. It's just too big.
The 7-inch tablets aren't that big. The problem is it's just that much bigger where I'm afraid of smacking it into a tree or something.
Right, and I don't want to break my nice tablet out in the woods.
Though those tablets are generally less expensive than a GPSR.
Some, probably.
Well, you get the 7-inch Android tablets, you can get those with the GPS for under $100 new. Not that they're ones I'd want to use.
Right.
But even the $150 ones are pretty good tablets with GPSR. What I'm noticing, though, is those 7-inch tablets seem to be disappearing. You're not seeing as many of those for sale.
Mm-hmm. And I do have an iPad mini, but it doesn't have the GPS in it. So it's of no use to me outside.
And I'm going to scold Apple for not including the GPS in all iOS devices. That should just be a given.
Yep.
All right, we also got an email from Limax. Why don't we move on to that one?
Sure. Limax, who is in the chat again, says, it would be difficult for me not to chime in on this subject. I've cached with multiple devices for years, whether it be my Palm Pilot tethered to my Garmin GPS 12, or numerous devices I use these days. When caching these days, I have a Garmin Nuvi set up in my car with caches that I've loaded from GSAC for my local area. He says, okay, within 50 miles of my local area, which allows me the flexibility to go caching when the mood strikes me. In addition to that, I still have my old standby, the Magellan Explorist 510, which helps when I'm away from cell signals. I also have a Garmin Oregon 750T, which we were just talking about, which I have to say is a tolerant-hate relationship with the UI in that thing. I'm surprised it's leading the market. Oh, wait, it's the only thing in the market. Like the sarcasm there. Along with the GPSRs, I also use my iPhone 6, which has several apps loaded for geocaching use, such as Cachly, Looking for Cache, Where I Go, TB Scan, IGCT, GC Tools, Cord Calc, and GC Buddy. Oh my goodness, that was a long list. Whew. I also have Garmin Connect, but I don't really use it. As a backup, I also have my iPad mini loaded with Looking for Cache, GeoBucket, and Where I Go. Don't laugh, I was glad to have my iPad 2 along back in the day when my iPhone 4 died while I was doing a Where I Go power trail. Also, I carry my son's old Galaxy S4, which allows me to do chirp and NFC caches. Yes, I found a chirp cache. I usually have a laptop in the trunk with me as well, just in case. Wow, Limax, you bring a lot of stuff with you geocaching, let me tell you. That was a long one.
Yeah, a long list, but that list of apps is kind of why, even if you're a GPS cacher, you should use your iPhone or Android phone, but in this case, he's using the iPhone. For caching, is you've got this slew of tools that you can load onto your smartphone. He's got probably a few more than most people would want to put on there, but all of those definitely have their place. and it can really help you when you're out in the field to try to solve those puzzles. And Where I Go is kind of a must now because none of the current GPSRs support Where I Go.
Right. That's what I found too. I've built a couple Where I Goes recently, and kind of in the notes I put, I would not try this on a GPSR because even if it's supported, it doesn't really work all the time.
Yeah.
So usually I recommend having a smartphone or bringing a friend that has a smartphone if you're doing a Where I Go.
Well, and the trouble is those were the Oregon 200, 300, 400, and then the 50s after that were the first ones to do it, and they really didn't have enough horsepower. Even the Windows mobile devices that supported it, and I went and got one of the Mio DigiWalkers just so I could do that. Bad idea. It still didn't handle it, and it had a different set of bugs than the GPSRs did. So it's kind of nice to see that we've gone to these open source in third-party players, because they seem to do a much better job than the original ones did. And I think a lot of that is simply they've had the benefit of 3 or 4 years of seeing how things don't work from the official ones.
Right.
That they go and fix them. So I think they're fixing the broken structure, the broken architecture of the Where It Goes.
Mm-hmm.
But again, the whole point of all that, you have the two devices so that you can do some of those weird caches that the GPSR doesn't support.
Right.
But we're really talking more about why to carry a smartphone and use it if you already have a GPSR and that's what you like to use. But what about if you have the smartphone and why should you run with a GPSR?
I have an idea. Because you're
Go
playing
ahead.
Pokemon on your smartphone and you're looking for caches with your GPSR.
Or Munsies or whatever. But yeah. But even then, that's not really caching with multiple devices. That's just using one for one and one for the other.
True.
But the thing that I like about having the GPSR is that set it and forget it. I'll go in, load up the caches, go to that next cache on the GPSR, and then just put down all the devices and enjoy the walk. When I get close, or if I hear the beep, because I do have the approach beep turned on my GPSRs, then I'll go pick it up and find it. In reality, what I find is I just leave it hanging around my neck and I use the smartphone all the time. But right. I do like having the two devices, because if you are a smartphone cacher going on some of these longer hikes, it's really nice to have that GPS because it doesn't chew through the batteries as quickly as your smartphone does.
Exactly.
And it is better, in my opinion at least, at the trails. The smartphones do really well, and they are better in the city. And that's a reason, too, for you GPS cachers to use a smartphone, because they use Wi-Fi and other radio signals, depending on what you've got for your phone. They can get much less inaccuracies than a GPS in the city. You go into Chicago or New York, or I'm sure LA is the same way. You're going to have a really tough time figuring out what block you're on.
Right.
You're going to be a lot closer if you have that smartphone with the Wi-Fi turned on. Don't turn off the Wi-Fi on your smartphone if you're in a city. You need it to help you isolate where you are, because it's going to be totally all over the map if you don't have that Wi-Fi on, because the GPS just bounces off the buildings and you get all these weird refractions.
Right. And having the smartphone instead of the GPS in the city kind of helps you blend in a little better, I feel like.
Very true. And on the trail too. But now people are going to think you're playing Pokemon Go.
Yep. But if you have a GPS and you're looking at it, I don't know what people would think. Like if you're out in New York City, you might be like, what is that person doing?
Yeah.
With that weird phone in their hand.
All right. Let's go to our last email, though, which comes from G-Nice. And the question is, has there been anything new in moving caches from phone to GPSR, especially on the eTrex 20? The answer is no. Nice and simple. Sorry. No. Back on episode 109, we had DeBear on to talk about how he's doing that, and he's using an OTG cable and the Nexus Media Importer software, and that will actually let you connect the phone or tablet to the GPSR and load the GPX files back and forth. You can also do some similar things with some apps on iPhones and a card, but not directly connected, that I found at least. So you always need to go to a SD or mini SD, whatever card, to do that. The unfortunately 750 that we've been talking about doesn't really let you do this at all. Mm-hmm. So, boo.
750 strikes again.
Well, it gets back to the same thing. It's really, they built the 750 to be its own device, which I do applaud that. You know, it can do that, but I want the ability for that to talk with my phone, not just talk through my phone, but talk with my phone.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the difference.
Right.
And it's all the difference.
And I had that, and it was giving me that weird issue where it thought I was in Germany or whatever. Yeah. And I was just like, I didn't want to.
They claim it's an iOS issue.
Right.
But I don't think that's actually quite right, because I think what's going on is it's advertising itself somehow to the iPhone as being a Bluetooth GPS. Mm-hmm. And I took a look at the actual decimal data, and it's basically shifting the decimal place 1 to the left. So instead of being like at 42, which I should have been, it was at 4.2.
Right.
Big difference.
Yeah. And then I tried playing Pokemon on my phone, and there was no Pokestops around anywhere.
I know, it was in the middle of a forest. What gives? If you're going to put us somewhere, you know, put us like in the heart of, you know, London or Berlin or something where there's a bunch of Pokestops.
Uh-huh.
And granted, you have to really move to get any, you know, steps in or anything like that, because it's, right, you know, everything that you do is orders of magnitude slower.
Right.
You have to get on a plane just to get like walking speed. But it's I like the concept of being able to use the GPS on its own, because okay, I could literally take one of those MiFi hotspots with me and connect up the 750 to it and just use that as a complete direct connected kit without a phone at all.
Mm-hmm.
Why you'd want to do that, I don't really know, but I could do that.
Right.
And all you have to do is go to, you go on the Wi-Fi at home, load up your Pocket Query and run. That alone is really handy. So I don't have to grab the cables, connect up and do everything. But if you're trying to do processing through GSAC, if you're trying to use Project GC, now you have a problem getting those caches onto it, and you still have to connect via cable.
Right. Because it would only connect to actual geocaching.
Yeah, website, it's right? Actually going through the API. It's just another API app built on the phone.
Yeah.
Well, on the GPSR. So, yeah, it's nice because it is just another app. But I really was hoping for more, you know, in the way of a direct connection. You know, give at the very least an API to developers so that they can tie into it. I would absolutely love, as I was kind of talking about earlier, to be able to go out caching with basically just the GPS when I'm actually out caching. You know, I'm doing, let's say, a power trail on a rail trail or something like that. I want to be able to just sit there with the phone or with a GPS. Okay, found this one, found this one, found this one. And instead of having that uploaded to geocaching.com, send that to an app which is going to handle all of my templates and do the cool things like the GSAC templates that we talked about last week.
Right, because wasn't it uploading blank logs? Does it still do that?
It still does that if you don't put in the note.
Oh, and that's so frustrating on a GPS.
Yeah. With the new drafts feature on geocaching.com, some of what I want is going to be there. I can conceivably, and I haven't tested this out yet because I just haven't been out caching anywhere that I can. But I want to be able to, or I want to say that what I can do now is upload the field notes to geocaching.com, open the geocaching app, go to drafts, and get the logs and submit the logs that way. So it's doing basically what I want from that aspect, but I have to use the geocaching app, which doesn't have any of the logic.
Right, and no templates or anything.
Exactly. You know, I really want to be able to hit that button and have like Cachly or CGeo use their templates to do what I want it to do. So give me the find of the day, give me this stuff. Yeah, and they could conceivably put that into the 750. I'd be happy with that too if I had a good way to build the templates and send them from the phone. But part of the thing is I hate typing on the 750, and for that matter, any of the touchscreen GPSs really stink at their keyboards, which is why I don't want to enter logs on there.
Right.
You know, you can put in a few key phrases and save it, put it on your field notes, run it through GSAC, run it. You know, this is one of the big reasons why GSAC has that field note template stuff, is because you can get very, very good at putting a few comments in, having GSAC do its thing with the logs, and not having to really do much more than that. And it's just quick and easy if that's what you're doing with the GPS. If you're doing it with a smartphone, it's still very capable, but most of the people I know who are using the smartphone either use a voice to text or do templates or copy and paste and make some tweaks to it right there. You don't have as much happening after the fact. But I really prefer, even on the smartphone, to not submit my logs until the end of the day. That way I have that list of all of the caches I found. I can go back and make tweaks. Yeah, I just went out Sunday, I think it was, and I had a couple of DNFs. I accidentally logged one as a founded instead of a DNF.
And then you can at least go back and check your list to make sure you didn't mess something like that up.
Exactly. And you can go back and compare it against the list of whomever you're caching with. So I really like the idea of saving it to the phone because it's just a much better interface all the way around.
Right. No, that's exactly what I do. Which I believe you just read about last week in my really long email about logging. Yes.
Well, and you did have a bunch of notes about the different devices that you're using for caching. You want to go into that for a bit?
Sure. Well, I do have an eTrex 30X. I'll preface with this, and I also have an iPhone. I use both for different occasions. If I'm just grabbing a cache or two, maybe during my lunch break or on my way home from work, or just getting maybe one or two caches in a specific area, I generally use my iPhone just because I always have it. And, you know, it's just so much easier to be kind of spontaneous, and I don't have to plan out what I'm going to do and have to have the GPS all loaded. But I do use the Garmin, the eTrex 30X. I use it mostly if I'm going, like you said, on a long trail or in maybe a big park with friends for an event or something. More so where I know I'm going ahead of time and I can plan that out in advance. And since the battery lasts a lot longer, you know, I can use it the whole day without draining my whole smartphone or having to bring a battery pack or something like that. And but then I also have apps like Where I Go on my iPhone, and TB Scan I also use. That makes it really easy for doing trackables at events. But the eTrex 30X also has the Chirp, So I've used that once, but iPhone you can't get the chirp on. So it really depends what I'm doing, which device or devices I will bring.
Yeah, there was an app, and I actually talked about it on some of the shows a long time ago that would do the chirp, but you had to have the Wahoo Fitness key.
Huh.
That was an external piece of hardware, and it works. I've done it. It's the easiest way to program a chirp that I've encountered.
Oh yeah.
However, it's not been updated in years, and I don't think it's gonna. I haven't even opened it, but I don't think it's going to work on iOS 11 because it's one of those 32-bit apps. Last I looked.
Ah, yes, that is going to be a problem for many apps.
As far as I know, there's no Lightning Wahoo Fitness key because Wahoo moved to Bluetooth, not away from Ant. They moved to Bluetooth. So at this point, I don't know of any hardware solution to get you Ant on the iPhone, short of the adapter, from Lightning to 30 pin, and using the old Wahoo Fitness key.
Yeah, which I don't have. So
no, I think they're still selling them though.
Oh yeah,
they were a year ago when I looked because someone was asking about it. I'm like, yeah, you can still do it. Here's the rig. You get this $30 adapter from 30 pin to Lightning, and then I want to say it was like $50 for the Wahoo Fitness key, plus a $10 app.
Yeah.
Just go out and buy a used Oregon 300 or something like that, which does the chirp, and it's going to be cheaper.
Right.
It's not going to be as easy, but it will be cheaper.
Yeah, I've used the chirp thing a whole one time so far. So
I don't know of any chirp caches around here. And we've talked about this, I'm sure, way too many times. But that is one of the reasons to have the multiple devices if you happen across it. And I would not buy, at this point, a GPS that doesn't support chirp simply because the ones that don't support chirp, I don't think are worth investing in. Garmin's the only one still making GPSs right now. Everyone else has ended, they're still selling them, but they've ended the design and production of new units. Meaning you're probably not going to get a whole lot of support going forward either. So Garmin right now is the only way to go. And if you're getting a Garmin, you want that Ant connectivity, which is what gives you the chirp.
Right.
Because those are the units that have the best longevity. Now, if you're looking to get a whole bunch of units, well, just get like the cheap E-Trex. Right. But realistically, it's the actually, does the 20 have the Ant? I don't think so. I was going to say the E-Trex 20, I think, even had it, but I'm not sure it does.
I think that's why I got the 30, was because it did have that over the 20.
But there was something else missing from the E-Trex that didn't support chirp. That it might have been like it didn't have an SD card or something like that, non-expandable. So if that's the case, you definitely want to go for the next level up. And that's basically what it came down to when I was looking at the various units. Is only the chirp enabled ones, the Ant enabled units, that were anything I could recommend. So that's why I recommend getting something that supports the chirp. None of them support where I go. That's not an option anymore on any of the GPSRs.
Yep.
But the 750 does support apps that in, what has it been, about a year now? I don't think there's been any apps released for it. So I'm not sure that is something worth looking into or not. And my feeling after using both the 750 and I still have the old E-Trex 30 is I prefer for multi-device caching the E-Trex 30 over the 750. There's no connectivity there. If I want to look for new caches in the area, if I want to do an update, I can't do that. So that is a factor. However, I usually still run with a 30 because it is a smaller, more convenient unit, and it does have much better battery life than the 750.
Yeah, I agree.
White Coaster says the eTrex 20 does not support chirp, but does have the SD card.
Right. So you had it backwards, I think.
No. I was
thinking. Did you?
I was thinking that it didn't have the SD card or chirp.
Ah, yes.
So it does at least have the SD card. Now, Wet Coaster, is that the 20 or the 20X?
Yeah, what's the difference with the X and the regular?
The X was the updated version. So you can't get a 20 anymore new. You can only get the X versions.
Gotcha.
And then there's the 5, the 25 and the 35 that are the touchscreen versions.
Yeah, and I did not want that.
I'm like a lot of people I know. I don't especially want the touchscreen. They don't work as well if you're wearing gloves. Even if you get the gloves with the fingers that work, the accuracy isn't good enough that, especially on those smaller screens on a GPS, I'm hitting like every wrong button on those. So just give me a little joystick or buttons, and I'm much happier with the GPS. And that's one of the other reasons why do you want multiple devices, because you can get something like the 60 series or the eTrex 30, 20, whatever, not the 25s, not the 35s, and you have that tactile interface that works better both in cold and in like the rain. Because if it rains on a touchscreen, even if it's a waterproof device, the capacitive touchscreens, which is what all of these newer units are using, assume those little water droplets are touches. So they're trying to read it, and you'll get either false activations or enough information on the screen that it doesn't know what it's supposed to follow.
Right.
And Limax says he wished he would have bought a 60 series, but it's too late now. I agree that the 60 is nice. I still have my 62, I think it is. I can't read it from here. But I still have my 60 series. I almost never use it, though, because the eTrex 30 is actually more accurate than my 62. Part of that is the the eTrex 30, added support for GLONASS.
Ah, yes.
Big help.
I have an old, was it Magellan GC? The green one?
Yes, the Explorers GC.
Yeah, I never used that thing.
I actually really liked that unit. For $120, I think it was at the time. It was an awesome unit for people to get into caching and to use as a second unit.
Right. I think that's why I bought it, was because it was so cheap. And I was like, oh, it's specifically for geocaching. But then it was just a weird setup to me. I don't know. I just couldn't get the feel of it, I guess.
Yeah, it's very much a Magellan interface, and it had some weird quirks. But if you got into the Magellan interface, it was a really nice little unit. You are breaking up a little bit, Sydney, so I'm not sure what's going on. If you can kind of poke at that a little bit while I finish up the thoughts on that one. But one of the nice things about that was it was one of the early units that supported the paperless caching. And if you ran their software, it even would put the images from the cache page into the description. That was really nice. And of course, it did the field notes.
Right.
All right. Well, we're at 40 minutes right now, which isn't all that long for us, but especially since it looks like the Googles might be giving out on us, I think we should probably wrap it up. And we would love to get feedback from the audience as to what you're doing with the multi-device caching, what works for you, what doesn't work. Of course, the biggest problem is probably going to be the, holding a device in each hand. But what we did talk about that I had wanted to get into was things like power trails, power caching trips by car. That's when those tablets really do get to be handy. It's really nice to have those for whoever's doing the logging and or navigating. So something else to think about.
Yep.
All right, Sydney, we'll hope that the Googles hang in there with us for long enough. Tell people how they can find you normally.
Sure. I am on Twitter at ShermanatorGC. I also host the U.S. Geocaching Hour on Twitter. It's every Monday. I do that once every 6 weeks. Mondays at 9 p.m. Eastern. You can find that. I'm also on Geocache Talk podcast. Sundays also at 9 p.m. Eastern.
All right. Thank you very much for joining us. And we're anxious to get you on again. But next week, we've got one of your other cohorts from Geocache Talk, and that's Memphis Mafia. He's going to join us to talk about attending mega events. And of course, Gary was on last week.
Right.
We just figured we had to get all of you guys on.
Just all in a row. Just get it over and done with,
Exactly. And we'll have everyone on again, but it just made sense to try to get everyone on all at once. But the week after that, we're going to have Rock Chalk talking not about geocaching.com, but about his geocaching and a lot of the cool stuff that he does. One week he's in Germany, the next week he's in Michigan, and then, he's back to California.
Yep.
So this guy is all over the place, and we're going to find out a lot more about his caching with Road Caching 13. Then on the 27th, it's going to be Randomized Licks. L-I-X, Licks. And we had to get Scott Burks on for that, and we don't know that he's going to be on because, he is still in flux, but with any luck, we're going to have Scott Burks on to talk on Randomized Licks, and that's where we want all of those comments about your multi-device caching because, it's a randomized show. We can throw all that little stuff in there. Then August 3rd, we're talking puzzle caches again with Team AJK. That's Jennifer of Team AJK. And she's going to talk about some of those tools, especially the online tools that are going to help you with your puzzle caches. So check the Cacheamaniacs website at cacheamaniacs.com for more on the GeoGearHeads, including show notes for this and all of their episodes. We love hearing from our listeners, so leave us feedback by emailing geogearheads@cacheamaniacs.com or through social media. Your support keeps the Cacheamaniacs shows coming. Please consider becoming a patron through the link on our website to support the Cacheamaniacs shows. GeoGearHeads is produced by Chris Nuffenauer and Daryl Wanberg. This show is copyright 2017 by Daryl Wanberg. All rights reserved.
Cache with a Cacheamaniacs.